Cool. I'll crack into it. Yeah, so don't expect anything too amazing from this talk. I just thought I'd do a little presentation on, some of the plants in the Paparoa area of the West Coast. Yeah, I sort of lived in just south of Greymouth for 3 years. Just moved up to Marlborough now, but it was kind of an area that I spent a bit of time mucking around in. And yeah, it's quite a cool part of the coast, and yeah, everyone should go and have a look at some stage. But for those of you who don't know where it is, it's kind of between Westport and Greymouth, the section of coastline between those two towns. It's probably about 100k section of coast with quite a lot of sort of rocky coastline, some beaches, some lagoons, and sort of quite a extended area of kind of lowland rolling hill country. And behind it, before you hit the sort of Paparoa mountain range proper, and that goes up to sort of about 1600 meters. And yeah, it's sort of an isolated block of mountains. So I'm not going to worry about the mountain plants. We'll leave that for another time. And I haven't really spent a lot of time in the Paparoa tops because it's really hard to get into, but this is more focused on the lowland stuff and just a few of the interesting plants that you find along that coastline and sort of slightly inland. Yeah, there's some really nice salt turf communities along the coast on some of the rocky headlands around Punakaiki. You would have seen, if anyone's been there, there's quite good little salt turfs along the Pancake Rocks Blowholes Walk and sort of down the Truman Track and places like that and around Charleston. And yeah, it's a cool, interesting place. And then in behind that, you've got kind of fairly lush, really wet rainforest with sort of, very thick understory in a lot of places. And quite a, basically what you call, temperate rainforest. And the interesting thing about this part of the coast is that it's got more, much higher endemism or sort of, endemism and rare species than the rest of the West Coast, except for sort of maybe the northern, right up in the Kahurangi section. But it's, basically when you hit Greymouth, from Greymouth south, the endemism drops right away. And I'll talk a little bit about the possible reasons for that in this talk. And so it's sort of the sort of West Coast. The West Coast generally is unusual in that it's a large area. It's got a lot of natural vegetation left, but it doesn't have high endemism in New Zealand terms. So it's really low in endemism and doesn't have that many threatened species either, really. Like it's quite low compared to where we are up here in Marlborough. It doesn't even compare. So there's and So hopefully if this works, can I scroll through? It's not allowing me to go to the next page. I don't know why that is. Here we go. Okay, so we'll talk about some rare entities for a start. Some of these photos I've borrowed off other people. So if they haven't got a recognition at the bottom, they're mine, and if they have, they're someone else's. Quite a few of them are from people on the committee. So, Gentianella scopulorum is a really rare species, critically endangered. This one grows on the Charleston coastline. It's sort of a salt turf species, so it's one of the few New Zealand gentians on the mainland that are in the salt turf communities. The only other one is down in the southern part of New Zealand. This one has been managed quite a bit by Doc over the years to try and keep it alive, and it still doesn't really seem to be doing that well. Not really sure what to do with it, really. It's kind of a difficult species to manage. Its habitat gets encroached on by lots of different weeds, so there's heaps of gorse and exotic grasses and things, so it's really only surviving on the very edge of the kind of coastal bluffs where it gets, really heavy salt laden kind of spray and wind landing on it and killing off all of the exotic stuff that can't handle that. So it's a cool little gentian, and it's only found in the Charleston area on a section of about a kind of couple of k's of coastline. Yep. Another one from the Charleston area is Brachyglottis rotundifolia ambigua. Yeah, Melissa and I went on a bit of a recce through here, I don't know, probably nearly a few months ago now, quite a few months ago, and found a nice plant of this. It's critically endangered as well. It's sort of taxonomically indeterminate. No one's really done any work on Brachyglottis for quite a long time, so we're not entirely sure if at the moment it's regarded as a separate variety, but who knows, if someone did a revision on these, it might just come out as an unusual form of Brachyglottis rotundifolia, so status may change, but it's at the moment it's critically endangered as it's only found sort of around Charleston, and it sort of likes kind of scrubby forest. It can grow right out near the coast, but it kind of is generally, you know, a little way inland on the really impoverished kind of Pākehī type areas around Charleston, not right in the Pākehī proper, but sort of on the steeper faces, slightly better drainage, and it grows just in manuka scrub and kind of light forest canopy cover, yeah, or right out in the open sometimes, and it can get up into sort of a small, yeah, shrubby tree. Yeah, cool plant. You'll see some right on the side of the road if you're driving through Charleston, just south of Charleston. There's a couple of good plants right on the side of the main highway, and another one down near the Tirapahi river on the side of the road, so keep an eye out for it. Yeah, and it probably gets browsed by goats. In my experience, in Fiordland, Brachyglottis rotundifolia gets chewed heavily by goats where they occur in its range, and so it's yeah, probably one of the reasons why it's endangered is high goat and deer numbers in the past. There are not so many. There's still quite a few goats in the area, but in the exact places where it lives, there aren't generally, because there's sort of been a lot of people living around the area now. But yeah, I haven't got any photos of its flowers because I haven't actually seen it flowering, but that's the main difference between it and the rotundifolia var rotundifolia. It's got different flowers, so yeah. Another taxonomically indeterminate entity, Craspedia charleston. So this is one of the many Craspedias that are being revised by Landcare at the moment. Who knows what it'll end up being coming out the other side, but at the moment it's an unnamed, tag-named entity called Craspedia charleston. It's critically endangered and only lives on the coastal turfs, sort of in the Charleston area. And it doesn't really extend too much down the coast, I don't think, because the rock type changes. So it grows on gneiss, which is metamorphic rock, which makes up the coastline around Charleston, and south of that you get into limestone, mudstone, sandstone sort of coastline, which is a bit different. And another species of Craspedia kicks in down there. And I'm not sure how far north this thing goes, whether it gets up to Cape Fowl and sort of further north, but it's mainly in the Charleston area, so it's currently critically endangered and only grows in sort of coastal salt turf habitats as far as I'm aware. Yeah, so that's another cool little one, and that grows sort of in the same sort of habitat as the gentian. Gratiola F. consonant. That's I'm not sure other people would have seen Gratiola consonant in other parts of the country. This one's a bit different. The leaf shape's a bit different, and yeah, quite round and doesn't look quite the same. So who knows what's going on there? It might be a separate entity. If someone would like to do some work on those, it'd be good, because there are a few different forms around the country. It's nationally endangered. It's not strictly in the Paparoa part of the west coast. It does extend up into the northern part up towards Karamea, and it does go a bit further south down the coast as well, but it's yeah, there's quite a lot of it around on the Paparoa lowlands, and it grows in forest and can be in quite deep shade, and sort of little wet seeps and pools in the forest, under the forest canopy, where you get kind of standing water for long periods. It grows sort of often underwater completely for part of the year, and just in those little forest sort of damp hollows. Yeah, so keep an eye out for that if you're down that way. Cool little plant. And yeah, the populations are kind of scattered across, a large area, but they're very, like sort of sparse, I suppose you'd say, and it's sort of hard to estimate how many individual populations there are because they're so far and widespread that it's kind of hard to count them. Yeah, no, do a good population estimate. Lepidium flexicaulis, this is one of the coastal pepper cresses in the brassica family, so it's related to cabbage and roe reaper and other native things like watercress. It's nationally endangered. This is also not only found on the coast, but it sort of extends up towards Karangi, and I think it's out on the, might be out on the Chathams as well, I think. But yeah, the southern limit of the species is just north of Greymouth, Point Elizabeth. And yeah, it's kind of all of the local New Zealand pepper cresses are kind of endangered, primarily because they get hammered by brassica pests that were brought here with all our crops. So white butterflies and diamondback moths and various rusts or other kind of fungal diseases. And yeah, there are lots of different, and whitefly and all those diseases, aphids. So they get really hammered by things. And the only place these ones really can survive is in coastal salt turf, where there is high nutrient levels. So they're holding on in areas with lots of seals now. They probably were in areas where there were lots of seabirds nesting in the past, and high guano levels to keep them kind of going and keep out other sort of species. So they can tolerate kind of animals rolling all over them and kind of squashing them because they're pretty flat anyway. But yeah, basically where you find them now on the coast is only in areas that are frequented regularly by seals and shags and things. So they need that guano or seal poo to kind of survive. Yeah, so that's another little interesting one, and that's scattered all the way up from Greymouth sort of north right up to Fairwell Spit on the western side of the South Island. This is one we just found the other day on a Nelson Botanical Society field trip. It was pouring with rain and I lost my GPS temporarily, which was a bit annoying, but this is a fairly rare orchid. Not super rare, but it's in decline now. It lives in wetlands. Pterostyles pallidosa likes sort of Pākehī wetlands. I'm not sure what its habitat is up in the North Island, but it's a wetland specialist anyway. And as far as I'm aware, it hasn't been found south of about Charleston on the west coast. So it's declining primarily because wetlands have been drained and removed across most of the country, lowland wetlands, so there aren't that many of them left, and there are a predominance of wetlands on the coast still. But I haven't ever seen a species before on the coast, so it's a sort of first for me. But it does extend down to the Paparoa area, so that's one of the rare entities. It's quite a cool little thing. Yeah, just this one was just growing in kind of Pākehī wetland under sort of low manuka shrubs with sort of Glycania, tangle fern, and things like Machiarina teretifolia and things. So yeah. Another species that is in this area, it's sort of this is a Westland specialist, Bulbinella modesta. It's also a Pākehī wetland specialist, so it lives in that really impoverished, open Pākehī wetland, often grows out of clumps of sphagnum moss, but also just generally in wet Pākehī. And then that photo, you can see it's growing with Glycenia and Dianella nigra and a few other things. But that extends down from sort of just north of Westport all the way down to southern Fiordland. We found it was only known to about, I think, Hollyford until quite recently. We found a bunch more down in near Pusica Point in the very southern end of Fiordland, so it's kind of got a large range extension, but it's only grows on the very western side of the island and these Pākehī wetlands, and it's declining as well for the same reasons that the Pterostylis pallidosa is. A lot of wetlands have been drained on the coast, and also just weed invasion. You know, lots of Pākehī wetlands are getting invaded by gorse, which takes over all those open areas where the species likes to grow, and possibly even things like sphagnum moss harvesting and things can wipe it out because it sort of disturbs all of its kind of habitat. But if you want to see this species, a really easy place to see it is down on the road to Okarito, just in southwestland there. If you just head along that road a bit till you hit some Pākehī on the side of the road, you'll find it just growing in that along the sides of the road there.
What the fuck happened then?
But it's a interesting little species. And Craspedia punakaiki is another sort of taxonomically indeterminate thing. It's growing on the coast. It kind of comes down from just north of Punakaiki. I'm not sure exactly where its extent is because it's not very well described yet, but it's primarily on mudstone and limestone calcareous substrates, I think, in the coastal turfs. So you'll see it on the Punakaiki Pancake Rocks walkway and places like that. There's heaps of it down the Truman track at Punakaiki. And it's sort of it's larger than the Craspedia Charleston.
That's just great. That's really helpful.
Someone's on not muted in the background there. It grows on sort of coastal salt turfs and around sort of in really salty areas on cliff tops and things. It's got really large glossy leaves. Hopefully we'll get a name on that at some stage fairly soon with the revision that's coming. But at the moment it's one of the more uncommon species that's only found on the sort of Punakaiki coast as far as I'm aware. And its population is pretty good at the moment. It doesn't have any major threats because the bit of coastline it's on is fairly well protected. Some of it's in national park and a lot of it's well vegetated with natural vegetation, so it's pretty good. There's another species we found on the Nelson Botsop trip the other day to Charleston. These photos are from Golden Bay because it wasn't flowering when we saw it in Charleston. Just finished, so you can still tell it was the species. But so this extends down to about Charleston way, somewhere in that neck of the woods, as far as I'm aware. Cool little Caladinia, really tiny, hard to see, and grows in sort of really impoverished, but drier habitats than some of the other Pākehī species. So on the kind of dry, quartzy sort of iron pannies areas with low vegetation like Manuka and Glycenia and stuff, but sort of not in the wet places, more in the dry kind of sandy areas. It's an interesting little plant. It's quite sparse, so it's scattered all up and down the country down to this point, but it's not easy to find. And it flowers for a very short time, so you kind of have to get it when it's flowering. And it only flowers for sort of a week or two. So as you can this photo is just of a piece of coastline just north of Greymouth. Yeah, kind of up from Rapahoe Beach. Yeah, which is an interesting area of conglomerate cliffs and sandstone and mudstone kind of in there as well. Yeah, I just thought I'd put these in to kind of show the geological variety. So the map on the left is from Westport south down to Greymouth. Westport sort of on the flat bit at the top, and Greymouth just the other side at the very bottom. And it's a geological map of the Paparoa Coast. And the Paparoa Range is kind of the grey and green bit running up the kind of middle of the image. You can see all the different colours there indicating all the different rock types. Whereas if you look at the one on the right, that's southwestland heading south of Hokitika down sort of towards Franz Josef, and all the bluey stuff is the Southern Alps proper, climbing up, and all the yellow and green bits and purple bits is grey sort of out on the coastal strip. So it's a lot less diverse geologically. There are little pockets of kind of diversity in little up sort of against the hills, but the Paparoa area is much more geologically diverse. When you look at maps like this, you can see there's a whole sort of mishmash of stuff going on. And another thing to note is that the kind of Paparoa Range sort of blocks, it comes right out to the coast at the southern end and sort of pushes right out into the sea almost. And so there's a kind of lowland plain sort of area to the north of that, but it gets blocked off to the south, whereas the rest of the west coast has a large sort of coastal plain running up it, except for Knights Point. So there are a few possible reasons for all of these southern limits, which I'm gonna go through a few of them in a minute. But a lot of species come down from the North Island or northern South Island and stop at about sort of Greymouth area or Charleston area on the west coast. Some of them go further south on the east coast, but on the west side they're limited to generally north of Greymouth, a lot of these things. And there are a few sort of possible reasons for this. Temperature being one of them. Because of the Paparoa Range being where it is, it's sort of the flats in front of it out towards the sea are reasonably kind of mild temperate areas. They have a kind of close coastal climate, don't get a lot of frost, and sort of are protected from, you know, strong southerlies and things by the range kind of jutting out to the south and kind of blocking that southerly wind from coming up and kind of hitting them. So you get Nico palm forests and things coming down to sort of Greymouth, and it's really common to Greymouth, and then from there on south it kind of peters out in just tiny little pockets and kind of really sheltered spots. So a lot of that's related to temperature, I think, and yeah, protection from frost and things. Yeah, and obviously the other main reason is past climate and glaciation. The sort of area, the coastal area and the Paparoa section has been less glacially destroyed than probably the coastal strip further south. So there's more intact. Back in the glacial periods, there would have been more vegetation cover in the area sort of to the west of the Paparoa Range, whereas to the south, coming off the main Southern Alps, glaciers came right out to the sea, and a lot of the geological sort of formations south of Greymouth are geologically related once you get out to the flats. Whereas to the north, there are still some coastal kind of formations, old seabeds and things that have risen up. So basically, yeah, south of Greymouth, the land area would have been scraped fairly clean in the glacial periods, and that's sort of evident from the beach gap. So the beach, native New Zealand beaches, go down to sort of just near Greymouth on the coast and stop. So you get hard beach, black beach, and red and silver beach and Mountain Beach, all just behind Greymouth from the coast up to the tops. And then from there south on the coastal strip, you don't get any beech forest till about sort of Paringa River in southwestland. And that's, yeah, I think that's primarily because that area was wiped fairly clean by glaciers, and so the beech, it doesn't spread fast as it's seeding, so it's just slowly kind of gaining ground again and moving back into westland from the north and south. And some of these other species that are associated with beech forest peter out as well, kind of in those areas. So there's sort of associations with other species there that are causing these southern limits. Yeah. So some of the species, I'll just run through a few of the interesting ones that go down to south, to the southern end of the Paparoa area. So obviously Nico palms, they do extend south of this area, but they're very rare. There are a few little pockets sort of south of Hokitika, and there are occasional records further south along the coast of individual plants, but basically Greymouth is the kind of southern limit of like good dense Nico forest. And there are species like Pimelia longifolia, which is found around Charleston. This doesn't go further south on the coast. It likes that sort of really impoverished, conglomerate-y, coal measury kind of country, grows in sort of, yeah, really low fertility environments, but it doesn't like it super wet. And so, yeah, that's another species that only gets down to that area. We found some Shizea bifida the other day on our field trip around behind sort of Charleston area as well. So that's southern limit for the species. Also growing in similar habitat, really impoverished, granite sandy, but drier sort of substrate. And Dipoblechnum fraseri, or Blechnum fraseri, depending on which way you're going with the split. That doesn't go further south of, yeah, just north of Punakaiki. And same sort of, yeah, low fertility forest and scrub. Yeah, so there's a few interesting things there. And a lot of these species are all, their southern limits are literally within probably about a kilometre of each other. It's quite, yeah, it's quite a profound sort of stopping point for a lot of these. Dracophyllum elegantissimum, one of the more newly named large Dracophyllum species that sort of gets down to the southern end of the Paparoa range. I think it might creep potentially slightly across the Grey River, but I haven't seen it over there yet. And yeah, that is geologically related as well, I think. Asplenium lepidotum, that's a it's like Asplenium oblongifolium, but it only grows on limestone and calcareous mudstone sort of substrates. Yeah, so it's a calcicole asplenium, and that because the south of Greymouth there is very little limestone on the coast, it's been all wiped off by glaciers. There isn't any Asplenium lepidotum south of Greymouth as far as I'm aware. But it, yeah, gets to sort of where the limestone ends, it ends as well. And here's a whole bunch of other ones. So Anamanthele lestoniana, there's only one population of that on the whole west coast that we're aware of, and it's just near Punakaiki. Asplenium lampriphyllum, Melissa Hutchinson just found a population of this near Charleston, which is the southern limit of the species. I think it's in the Marlborough Sounds, is the only other place it's been found in the South Island. Calochilus paleodosis, one of the bearded orchids, that gets down to sort of the Pākehī areas around Charleston. Dracophyllum townsendii is a sort of, yeah, it gets down to the lowlands on the coast, but normally it's more associated with sort of montane forest. But that southern limit is is just near behind Greymouth. Hoheria ovata, that's a large Hoheria like Sextulosa, but one that prefers calcareous rich substrates, so that lives on the limestone and stops when the limestone stops. Lycopodiella lateralis, another Pākehī wetland specialist. That goes down to sort of Charleston area. Metrosideros parkinsoni, which is in the photo. Cool little rata. Always looks a bit sick, but it's just how it looks. That gets down to the southern Paparoas, and that's only on that sort of it likes low fertility kind of forest, shrubby forest with lots of pink pine and things like that, and manuka and stuff. Myosotis afbrocchi, which may possibly be extinct now. Been trying to find that around behind Charleston for the last few years and haven't had any luck, but it's possibly there still somewhere. It grows under limestone bluffs. Olearia rani, which everyone will be familiar with further north. That's extends down to sort of just north of Greymouth as well. And then a few others, Orthoceros orchids. Pseudopanax McIntyre is a limestone specialist as well. And Thalametra carnea and Veronica townsendii, which is also a limestone specialist. So there's sort of a theme. The limestone calcareous loving entities disappear south of the Paparoa area, which is not surprising because there's hardly any limestone. And there's a lot of orchids that kind of peter out at that point as well, which I think is probably geologically related. They don't seem to be growing on the lowland glacial substrates that you get further south on the west coast, or the glacial moraines and things. Not that we've found anyway yet, but so I'm happy. This is pretty much the end, but I'm happy to take any questions that anyone's got. Not sure if I'm rambling on too much. It's hard when you haven't got a live audience, but
I think if anyone's got any questions for Rowan and he's happy to answer them, by all means. Is that all right, Rowan?
Yeah. No, go for gold. Yeah.
More of a comment / question. Thank you, Rowan. That was actually really cool, and it must have been tough because it's hard to do this without a live audience, without that feedback and energy in the room. So thank you for putting your neck in the noose. I'm looking forward to like Hokitika 2027, where we can all go look at some of these cool plants. Were you going to lead a field trip for us, please?
I can do one in Blenheim now that I'm up here.
Yes. Oh, let's do that. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Has anyone else got some questions for Rowan? Some pretty cool plants.
Oh, absolutely.
Kia ora, this is Sarah Richardson here. Can I ask a question, please, Rowan?
Yeah.
Cyathea delbata, where does that sort of peter out on the west coast? Is that somewhere around Greymouth?
Cyathea delbata. It's a good question, actually. There's not really a lot of it on the west coast, to be fair. I'm not sure. I'd have to look up. I haven't actually. Yeah, that's probably one of the ones that would be in that similar area too, I think.
I don't know if I can be heard. Am I unmuted? I'm not sure.
Yep.
So there's silver fern at, there's one or two on the Barrytown Flats, and I've seen a few around Westport in slightly drier locations.
Yeah, it likes the dry, doesn't it? So it wouldn't.
Cool, thank you.
I was wondering, Rowan, I think the first couple of slides and you were talking about the invasive species popping in and stuff and only being kept away by the weather. Historically, was there seals around that area?
At Charleston, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, there would have been, but the cliffs are really high, so probably more likely sort of nesting shearwaters and stuff like that, I'd imagine, and shags and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they've all been wiped off by, obviously predators. So There's still the western petrel colony behind Punakaiki, sort of just south of Punakaiki, but it's pretty much the last sort of remnant of those colonies. But I would have expected there to probably have been quite large colonies of gulls and all that kind of stuff in those areas. So, yeah.
There's still a lot of penguins in that area, of course.
There is, yeah, that's true. There is a lot of penguins, yeah. Yeah, but they're sort of, yeah, they do go up the cliffs a wee bit where they can find little gaps to get up, but yeah.
Has anyone else got anything to ask Rowan? If not, unmute. Sounds like something out of Star Wars. Unmute and let's give him a big round of applause.
Thanks, Rowan.
Right.
Cool. I'll turn this thing off and then.
Oh, we're gone. We're on.
If anyone has any other species that I know of that stop in that area, let me know, because I'm trying to rack my brains and just listing off a few, but yeah.
Well, I'll say on behalf of the NZPCN, Rowan, and I know you're part of the council and all, but thanks, because that was awesome. And yeah, it's bloody good that you've made our first ever Zoom meeting a big success. Thank you.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yep. And we'll call it a day.
That's it. Just like that. Well, thank you everyone else as well for turning up. This has been awesome. And yeah, wow. Different.
You've stopped recording now, eh, Matt?